In this video, we're going to show you how to install the thermostat with housing on your Kia Sorento located on the side of the engine. Remove our lower splash shield here. There's going to be a series of 12mm bolts. You want to get loose in and remove these. There would normally be one right in the center section here, but it's missing. There's going to be a few of these plastic retainers. Using our Phillips head screwdriver on our particular model, go ahead and remove that center section. That's going to allow us to get behind the base with our trim tool and pop that out. We're going to do this for the remainder of these. Go ahead and remove that splash shield, set that aside. Note the splash shield removed. On the passenger side lower portion of the radiator, you're going to locate the drain or the petcock here. I'm going to go ahead and reach up and turn this counterclockwise. Now we do have a catch can underneath to catch our coolant. Let's go ahead and let that drain out. Now at this point, we're just at a slow drip here. Let's go ahead and close this up. So turn that clockwise, thread that plug back in. I want to make sure that it's good and tight. I'm going to go ahead and grab a rag and just wipe that down. With the hood open, go ahead and locate your battery right here on the driver's side front portion of the vehicle. We'll use a 10mm socket, our extension and ratchet, to go ahead and loosen the 10mm nut here. Go ahead and give this a twist. Go ahead and pull that up and off and set it aside. We're going to remove our air intake tube. We have to use our Phillips head screwdriver. And normally what you want to do is unscrew the center. And as this comes up, you can use your trim tool to lift it up. Now ours are slightly damaged, but normally the center will come up and you can get your trim tool underneath, lift up the centerpiece, and then pop out the bottom. Lift this up, pull it towards you, and set that aside. And if your battery has this cover over the positive terminal, you're going to push in on this clip, and
and lift that up to expose the terminal. Use your 10mm socket. Lift up the entire unit here. I'm going to give this a twist. Lift it up and off, and just tuck that aside. Now along the front side of the battery, if you go down, there's going to be a clamp right here. This is a securing clamp here. It's a 12mm bolt, so we're going to use our 12mm socket with an extension. I want to loosen and remove this. Now you can use an impact driver, or you can use your ratchet like I'm doing. I'm going to remove that bolt and the clamp. With that removed, we can now pull the battery out. Now reach in here, slide that battery, and lift that up and out. Now that we have our air intake tube removed, we're going to go ahead and remove the 3 10mm bolts securing the air filter box. 1, 2, and the third one is right back here. Remove those. We're going to remove or loosen the hose clamp holding our air intake tube to the throttle body to 10mm on our particular model. So we're just going to use our 10mm socket and an extension. And we're going to loosen that up. Now right up top here, we have a vacuum tube with a clamp on it. You use a pair of pliers. Pinch that, slide it back. Break that free and work that off. Work that off. On the back here, there's another hose clamp. Use your pliers. Slide that back, get a little pinch and a twist, and then pull this off. Go ahead and pull this whole thing up and out. Now I want to pull this bulk harness unit away from our unit, away from the thermostat housing. And there's tabs, there's mounting tabs. There's one here and there's one on the bottom side. I'm going to use a pocket screwdriver. And you want to get in here and you want to release this and start to pull this off of the metal bracket. Here it is. This is the back one. Then we have the front one, which is on the bottom here. There it is. Just want some flexibility here. And we have our coolant temperature sensor right here. There's a little spring clip on the bottom. You're going to push that in and wiggle that connector off. Now there's a series of bolts all the way around here. And the one we're going to go for first is right down here. It's the bracket that holds all of these connectors and everything. It's a 10 millimeter. I'm going to go ahead and get to that. Now, in doing a job like this here, a magnet is going to be super helpful, as the bolts may drop out. I want to go ahead and separate these 4 connectors here. Most of these are simple. Pull out the little tab. Little lock tab. And then pinch that retainer and pull this off. You're going to pull this back. It's just going to give you access to the other clamps in the back here we need to separate. There's 2 hose clamps here in the back. We need to go ahead and disconnect or pull back and pull the hoses off. Using some hose pliers. I'll move those clamps back. Now, it's very important to inspect your hose clamps. These particular ones are in decent shape, but if they're rusted, corroded, if a tab bends or breaks, you definitely need to replace these, because this is what's keeping your cooling system from leaking. I'll go ahead and grab that hose with my pliers here, give it a little twist. And once that's broken free, I'm going to twist that hose off. I might lose a little bit of coolant here, even though we drained it. Go ahead and tuck that aside. Let's do the same for that back lower hose here. Now on the front side here, we have our lower radiator hose we need to remove, upper radiator hose, and we have these 2 ports right here, these 2 hoses. So there's a total of 4 in the front right here. We're gonna go ahead and jump on right now. inspect the hoses. You're going to look for bulging hoses, split, torn, anything seeping. You want to go ahead and inspect those and replace them as necessary. Now I'm using a pick to get around the back side of this clamp. This clamp is kind of stuck to the hose. This little clamp right here on ours is in horrible condition. We're just gonna rip that thing right off. We're gonna have to replace that one. It's just so rusted. You can just see that just crumbling apart on us. Try and flex these hoses and get them tucked away somewhere so they're not in our way. Now this hose clamp here is kind of wedged underneath. You can't really get pliers on it, so I'm going to put my pick around the opposite side of this and just pull it up. It kind of loosens it enough where it'll spin it up. Like that, and then we'll put our pliers on there. Pull that off. I'm going to go ahead and use a pair of pliers here to go ahead and push this button out. That's going to release the. It's going to go ahead and release the crank sensor from the bracket. I'm going to use my 12mm socket, an extension here. That's one of the long bolts here. There's one just to the other side of the thermostat housing right here. Remove that one. Disconnect this sensor right here. I'm going to push down this little tab and wiggle this off. And if you follow this wire around, it goes into this bracket right here. We're just going to use a pair of needle nose pliers to release this retainer right here. There it is. Now the idea here is to try and get access to the back over here. There is one more hose in the lower portion here. Now removing the 10mm bolt on the securing bracket for this last hose in the back. Now this bolt goes up at an angle. Here's a little bolt here. It's a 10mm. Now we're separating that hose. And then down here, there's a stud with a 12mm nut on it. I'm going to loosen and remove that. Now with that hose clamp, with this hose clamp backed off and the hose is broken free, we're now going to grab the thermostat housing should start to pull this away. Here it is. The next step is to go ahead and clean everything. Now, we have a bunch of coolant all puddled up inside here. And then down inside, this is the most important right here. Now right here we have a gasket. You can see it's moving. This has to get removed. And there's one over here as well. You got to make sure you get rid of these gaskets. Our next step is you got to clean up all around here. We're going to use some spray cleaner and clean up all around here, get rid of any dirt, old coolant, stuff like that. We're also going to clean down inside here. We are going to cover this hose or pull up out of the way, and we're going to clean up all that residual coolant down here so we don't have a mess down here when we start our reassembly. So next step is clean up the mess. Now here's a little tip. Some of these bolts here that hold your thermostat housing may be submerged into a coolant jacket or a water jacket. Now, you might be able to find this out by a lot of coolant and gook all built up on top of here. So what we have to do is we have to clean this up. And when we install this bolt, we're going to apply some thread sealant onto this here. That's going to keep coolant from coming up through the threads and then leaking out, which I believe ours was. That's why it was a mess. Now, before we install this part, let's go ahead and focus on a couple different things. On the back portion here where the hose goes into, you want to go ahead and remove that bolt if you have it there. And set that aside. On the back, I want to focus on the gaskets. Make sure that the gaskets are fully seated and pressed in all the way. No gasket maker or RTV is utilized on this here. It's just these here. Now go ahead and spin this around. And our thermostat is already installed in this unit. And here is the thermostat neck right here. Let's go ahead and get this installed. So what we're going to try and do is we have the housing in place, but we have to work it towards the front, towards the radiator, in order to get this lower metal hose in, because it's not very flexible. So we have to try and do is get that down and underneath this unit. There we go. Line this up. Okay, so now we have it in place. We're now going to use our light to go ahead and make sure that the unit will be seated up against the cylinder head. Now, if you're meeting any bit of resistance, you need to check that out. And I am meeting resistance on the front portion. One of the hoses is getting stuck. And there we go. So you just have to make sure that this unit sits flush up against the engine. And there it is right there. So now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and get our nut and 2 bolts in. And then we can go ahead and start popping hoses into place. I'm going to get this nut started on the stud up front. Now remember earlier we had spoken about the bolts going into water jackets, and one of them had a bunch of goop and everything on there, so we had cleaned the hardware. We're going to apply some thread sealant to these. That'll seal up any ports if these do go into water jackets, and then we'll install them. Now installing your bolts, the longer bolt goes on the rear, shorter bolt on the front. I'm going to gently snug these down for now. Now that we have those bolts and the nut secured, I'm going to go ahead and go to this lower hose here at the base. We need to get that lined up and installed into the lower portion here. Now before securing down the two bolts and the nut, we need to go ahead and get that lower angled hose installed that has that 10 millimeter bolt on that flange. We need to have the housing flexible in order to move this a little bit and get that to line up. Once you get that lined up there, you should be able to squeeze that in there. Now there's a rubber O-ring seal on that as well. Okay. With that lower hose installed, I'm going to go ahead and get that 10 millimeter bolt started on that flange and into the thermostat housing, because I don't want that to pop out when I move this around. Now it's going to take you a little bit of time to get that bolt in there, and it requires you to kind of wiggle the unit around here and get that lined up. Next thing you want to do is double check the gasket. I'm going to use my mirror here and my light. I want to make sure that the gasket for the housing is still in place. It is key that these gaskets are still in place, because if you install this and tighten it down and those gaskets had moved, well, you're going to be repeating this job again. So let's go ahead and do it right the first time. I'm going to go ahead and snug down this nut over here. I want to torque down these two bolts to 15 foot-pounds. Now, if you have the ability to do so, you want to go ahead and torque down this nut to 12.2 foot-pounds. I'm just going to go ahead and snug that down with our wrench. I'm going to go ahead and try and thread in this lower flange bolt to 10 millimeter as far as I can by hand. I'm going to reach in there with my gear wrench and snug that down. Now once it bottoms out, just give it a little bit more. Doesn't have to be super tight. You do want it to be snug though. Now at this point is installing hoses and brackets and all that other stuff there. So let's go ahead and do that. Now remember, now is the time to go ahead and replace any of the hose clamps that you find necessary to replace because they're rotted or damaged or anything like that. This hose here, our clamp had crumbled apart, so I need to go ahead and replace that one. And we're just replacing our clamp with a worm clamp here. And I install our lower radiator hose. Okay. Install our upper radiator hose. Our upper radiator hose has stretched, caused some issues. We're going to go ahead and install a worm clamp on this. Go ahead and snug that down. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hoses attached in the front. In the back, we have 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to move the clamps forward on the 2 heater core hoses here. It's going to be easier to get that clamp moved on that rear hose first. Here we go. Looks like we have all of our hoses installed. Next would be getting the wiring harnesses and everything attached. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to bring our wiring harness with our bracket over. And there's going to be 2 10 mil bolts. Let's go ahead and get those started. I'm going to thread these in as far as I can by hand. And then I'm just going to put my ratchet on there and gently snug them down. Snug. And snug. I'm going to check and make sure that all of our wires are properly routed everywhere. I'm going to take that lower harness and feed that up. Press that harness with that little retainer clip into that lower bracket. Earlier we used the needle nose pliers to release that, so just pop that into place. Now you may not have this, I just used a securing strap to hold it up out of the way. It's not necessary, but I did find it beneficial for me to keep that harness up. I'm just going to remove that. Bring our harness down, pull our connectors up. I'm going to go ahead and get our harness pressed onto the mounting tabs. Just line up all of your connectors. Now they're all specific. There's no way you can mess these up. So all you're going to do is go around, line things up, push them in, and you're going to be feeling for positive engagement, something that's going to click, or you're going to feel it snap into place. You might hear it. Don't forget any of the ones that have the locking tabs, like this white one right here, this yellow one here. You have to make sure that they're pulled out all the way before you install them. If they're engaged or pushed in, you won't be able to get the connector on all the way, and it won't click into place. Okay, inspect each and every wire. Make sure they're all secured. Everything's up and out of the way. This point here, our entire thermostat and housing assembly is installed. I'm going to lower our air box down in a position. Get our intake tube installed onto our throttle body. We have a couple hoses here we need to pop on. One here, and then one over on the front side. I'm going to use my pliers to go ahead and move these clamps. Once I have these two clamps on, I'm going to use my 10mm socket, and we're going to secure our air intake tube clamp down below. You want to just snug down that clamp, give this a little wiggle, make sure it's nice and secured. Let's now install the through bolts that secure our air intake box. Let's go ahead and get our bolts started here. The back one, we're going to reach down along the back corner. Now that we have those started, I'm going to go ahead and snug those down. Once those bottom out, you're pretty much good because there's rubber bushings or dampers that hold that. Go ahead and grab that battery. Lower it down in a position. You want to make sure that your ground terminal is pulled out of the way. Now we want to make sure that the battery is slid as far back as possible because there's a retaining bar on the back that locks into the bottom portion of the battery. go ahead and snug that down. And once you feel that bottom out, like pretty much, you want to make sure it's good and snug, but you don't have to make it super tight. But you can definitely tell that that is bottomed out. Go ahead and grab that positive terminal. Install that. Snug down the securing nut here. Once that bottoms out, just give it a little bit more. You do want to make sure it's good and snug. Give this a twist. If the clamp itself is moving, you definitely need to tighten that down a little more. Give it a little wiggle. All right, and our positive terminal is now secured. Close the cap. Install this onto our air filter box. Bring this down. You want to take your buttons here, install the lower portion, and then push down on the center and secure that. You're going to do that for all three. Well, sometimes these plastic buttons, they do break, so you'll have to source some replacements.
Now we want to take our splash shield, feed it up underneath the tabs on our bumper. Let's get our bolt started. I'm going to gently snug these down. Across the front portion here, install your plastic push pins.
Now, using a clean funnel, you want to go ahead and put that into the top of your radiator. You want to go ahead and fill this up.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.